Organized by WISN-TV in Milwaukee, Marquette University Law School, and Milwaukee Public TV, and WisPolitics.com. It's 90 minutes.
Is a special presentation of WISN 12 in association with Milwaukee Public Television, channels 10 and 36, and WisPolitics.com. Wisconsin's voice will help shape the nation's agenda. Your vote on November 2nd will decide who will represent our state on the national stage. Tonight, in their final face-to-face appearance before Election Day, Democratic incumbent Russ Feingold and Republican challenger Ron Johnson join Mike Boucher for a conversation with Wisconsin. They'll take questions from citizen groups in Green Bay, La Crosse, Madison, Eau Claire, Wausau, and Milwaukee. It's all part of the Upfront Town Hall Challenge. Now from Eckstein Hall, the new home of Marquette University Law School in Milwaukee. Tonight's moderator, 12 News Upfront anchor, Mike Boucher.
And hello again, everyone, and welcome to Eckstein Hall at Marquette University Law School. I'm Mike Boucher. I'm a journalist who works here at the law school exploring public policy issues. I'm also the host of the statewide public affairs television program, Upfront. This is the third and final in our series of conversations with candidates for statewide office this year. In August, we hosted the Republican candidates in the gubernatorial primary. Last week, it was the party nominees in the race for governor. And tonight, it's the candidates for U.S. Senate in Wisconsin. With me at the table tonight are the Democratic incumbent, Senator Russ Feingold, and his Republican challenger, Oshkosh businessman Ron Johnson. A few words about the format tonight. I'll be asking the candidates questions for roughly the first 15 minutes or so in a free-flowing conversation. And then we'll begin taking questions from citizen groups around the state. These citizens were recruited based on their participation in their local communities. We found them by reading letters to the editor, minutes of school board, township, and city council meetings. They are Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, independents, and Tea Party members. Their assignment was to represent Wisconsin and come up with several questions they want answered, questions they all agreed on. And we want to thank them for their time and participation in advance. In fact, some of them are in our audience tonight. 12 News anchor Kathy Michaelby, my colleague, is here with the group from citizens of southeastern Wisconsin who have questions for the candidates tonight. And Dan Jones from Milwaukee Public Television, channels 10 and 36, is fielding questions from our internet viewers via WisPolitics.com, mptv.org, and WISN.com. Now the rules, and they're pretty simple. This is a conversation. The viewers tell us they want to hear more than talking points, more than sound bites or slogans. We have got 90 minutes tonight, but believe me, the time will go by quickly. So we're asking the candidates to answer questions as directly and concisely as possible. At times, I may jump in to follow up or simply move on. The candidates can also speak to each other directly, although again, I'll be playing the role of traffic cop. Our goal is to have the candidates address the issues the citizens groups raise and hear more about how they would tackle some of the country's toughest challenges. There are no opening statements tonight, but each candidate will have a 1-minute closing statement, and we ask the audience to please refrain from any applause until then. We tossed a coin for the order of questioning, and Mr. Johnson will go first. And actually, it's the same question to both of you, because I thought we would begin our conversation tonight by trying to get a better sense of your worldview. What you think of the current state of affairs in this country. Mr. Johnson, let me begin by asking you this. What do you think poses the greatest threat to our nation at this moment in its history?
I would say there's really no doubt about it. It's the out-of-control spending and debt that we're racking up in this country. And certainly as I'm traveling around the state of Wisconsin, that is the issue. Certainly it's the economy and jobs. I mean, obviously we've got to get this economy moving. We've got to start creating jobs. But people understand that racking up deficits of $1.4 trillion over the last 2 years, over $3 trillion have been added to the debt in just the last 3 years. And Senator Feingold has voted for all that. They understand that it's simply unsustainable. And of course, they take a look and they see Greece. Now they're watching France. They understand that, we're on that same path and we better do something about it. We better bring this to a grinding halt.
Senator Feingold, what do you think poses the greatest threat?
Well, I think it's more complicated than that. Of course the debt is one of the biggest issues. That's why I have worked so hard to reduce the debt and the deficit and successfully did so with President Clinton and Republicans in the 1990s, despite Mr. Johnson's ad, which is absolutely false. We actually got that done. But, you know, there are more challenges. This challenge of jobs is real. We can't just solve it by cutting spending. We have to also have creative ways to promote job creation, which a jobs tax credit would do. And frankly, there's an international situation out there that my opponent simply doesn't talk about. But one of the greatest threats we have is that Al-Qaeda attacked us and has not been brought under control, and we have problems with Iran. So truthfully, our challenges are multiple. They're not just one thing.
When I hear you on the campaign trail, it seems to me that you basically say Washington doesn't get it, that they're not listening. What evidence do you have of that?
Well, let's just take a look at the failed stimulus package. I mean, over $800 billion of additional debt, the stimulus package. I mean, over $800 billion of additional debt that's been put on top of our children and grandchildren. Senator Feingold provided the deciding vote for that stimulus package. And the premise of that was that government can actually create jobs. The government can actually create long-term, self-sustaining jobs, and that's just wrong. It's the private sector that creates long-term, sustainable jobs. I think that's the point I'm making, is I think this election really is a pretty stark choice, pretty clear difference in terms of the two candidates. You've got, on the one hand, Senator Feingold, who spent the better part of 30 years in politics, career politician, versus myself, 31 years as a manufacturer, producing products, exporting products, and creating real jobs. Now, that's a pretty stark difference for the voters of Wisconsin.
Real quickly, is there any reason why a career politician is a bad thing? Because, I mean, that's a term you use a lot, but there are others out there, Jim Sensenbrenner, sure. Paul Ryan, there are other career politicians.
No, the distinction I would make is what kind of governing philosophy does that career politician have? And I think Senator Feingold's record is certainly one that he does believe that the government is, by and large, the solution to our problems. He's voted for more spending. He's voted for more taxes 278 times. My governing philosophy would be less government intrusion, less government control, spending, and taxes. And I think that's the big difference in terms of a career politician that gets the correct governing philosophy that will actually create jobs versus one that relies on the government.
Senator, go ahead.
Well, actually, the fact is I voted to cut taxes. He says the recovery bill did nothing. It provided a tax cut to 95% of all working families in America, some $250 billion. That cuts taxes. In the health care bill, there's some 80 to 85,000 small businesses in Wisconsin. They're going to get a tax reduction to help them pay for their ability to pay for the health care for their employees. When it comes to a bill called the HIRE Act we passed this year, that's a tax cut, Ron. It provides a tax cut to any business that hires anybody that's been laid off more than 60 days. It's going to be a $6 billion tax cut. So on all of these issues, I have supported and we have passed tax cuts since January 20th, 2009. He wants to wipe out that entire agenda. So his statement that the recovery bill did nothing is absolutely false. It's absolutely false, and he just keeps saying it despite the fact that it's not true. In fact, all the evidence is that that bill probably prevented a depression, that it is estimated to have created or preserved something like 1.5 to 4 million jobs. So the notion that it did nothing flies in the face of all reality and, frankly, has been confirmed by just about everybody that's been honest.
Well, I'll give you a chance. One of the arguments you hear is that teachers' jobs were saved, firefighters' jobs were saved, police officers' jobs were saved. What's your response when you hear that?
Well, first of all, 3 days before Senator Feingold cast that deciding vote, he issued a press release and said...
On the stimulus.
On the stimulus. He issued a press release and said in the first year it would create 2.4 million jobs. After 3 years, it would create 9 million jobs. Well, the fact of the matter is we're a year and a half into this, and we're down 2.6 million jobs. Even if you take the position that, okay, there were some jobs saved in there, there were far more jobs lost, so the net effect is 2.6 million jobs lost. 85,000 just in the state of Wisconsin since this stimulus was passed. And if you just...
You're saying those bills were lost because of the recovery bill?
If you do the math...
Are you saying those are because of the Recovery Act?
If you do the math on those supposed to save jobs, they come at an incredibly high cost, somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 or $600,000, depending on how many jobs you claim were actually saved. And those were just temporary jobs. They weren't private sector, self-sustaining jobs. And those are the jobs that actually pay taxes, that actually fund what government we need.
Mike, you better tell the people in Plymouth, Wisconsin. I was with them the other night. That community worked for 11 years to have a new senior center. When the economy tanked, their plans and their hopes to have that senior center were dashed. I was with them the other night. when they had a celebration. The reason they're going to have that senior center is because of a $1 million grant from the stimulus package. And as Ron may or may not know, that's a very conservative community. But they were ecstatic that we stepped up to the plate. And who's doing the work? It's not government employees, Ron. It's the Joseph A. Schmidt Company of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, who are doing the work. It's private jobs. It's private work. That's a permanent firm. It's false that the bill didn't provide jobs.
You know what else is permanent? The $800 billion of debt that is now passed on to our children and grandchildren.
Let me move this conversation in a slightly different direction. But again, it's a philosophy question. And I heard you at an event a few weeks ago where you were speaking to a group of commercial realtors, and you were telling a story about Senator Judd Gregg, who is the retiring senator from New Hampshire. Not so retiring in his personality, maybe, but retiring anyhow at the end of this session. And you quoted him as saying that you have to understand that the people up here in Washington don't get it, that they don't believe in the free market system, that they don't believe in profits. My question is, do you believe that's true? I would assume if you're telling the story, you believe it's true. And would Senator Feingold fit in that category? Is he someone who doesn't believe in the free market system?
Well, certainly when you hear Senator Feingold demonize businesses, you know, that is certainly the implication of that demonization. It is unfortunate that an awful lot of people in Washington simply don't understand how the free market works, how private enterprise works, where real jobs are created. And again, that Exhibit A of that is the failed stimulus package. They came into office, you know, rather than what they should have done, is they should have come into office and say, you know, these 2011 tax increases that are scheduled, we're not going to increase taxes. We're going to make those tax rates permanent. That would have provided the certainty that would have caused consumers to start thinking about spending, would have created the certainty that business people would have thought, okay, maybe this economy will start recovering. By the way, that's what creates real jobs. That's what incentivizes a business person to actually invest money, is when they think the economy will grow and their demand for their products might increase. A $2,000 or $3,000 tax credit in the HIRE Act, that is not what prompts a business person to create a job.
How can somebody say an $800 billion bill that includes a $250 billion tax cut is somehow a waste of money or a ballooning of the deficit? The fact is, that was a tax cut, Ron. And you have never admitted that the bill had a tax cut because you're so committed to pretending that the stimulus bill did nothing. You can't even admit that 95% of all American working families got a tax cut from it. How is that wrong? And you like to minimize the effect of the HIRE Act? Look, I talked to a guy in Lake Geneva the other day. He said, you know, Russ, I added 2 jobs in part because of the HIRE Act. Now, that's a tax cut. This isn't a believer for tax cuts. It's literally saying, if you do this, we'll reduce your taxes to a business. That's what I favor. In fact, we should have a broader tax cut in the forms of a jobs tax credit over the next 2 years to stimulate more of this. So the truth is, on every item here that has to do with tax cuts over the last 3 years, he's against them, and I'm for him.
I think there's probably more, and I'll get to you in 1 second here, but there's more to, I think, what he's saying, and he can make his argument for himself. But your critics would say, when he talks about sort of an anti-business attitude, he says, well, look at the things Russ Feingold has done in his record. And they will cite several. They'll say he didn't vote for Wall Street regulations because he didn't think they were tough enough. They didn't go far enough. He voted for health care reform, but he didn't think that went far enough. He thought there should be a public option. He wants to regulate political advertising. He wants to regulate trade more. These are examples of a guy who wants more government control in our lives. What do you say to that?
Completely false. I don't want government control.
Those are true statements, aren't they?
It is not true that my focus is on those large institutions. It's true that I don't favor them. I favor Main Street. So when it comes to something like the Wall Street issue, I stood against any effort to try to let Wall Street make its own rules because I knew it would hurt our local banks and our local institutions. And that's exactly what happened. This bill doesn't do the job of regulating Wall Street adequately, and yet you have over-regulation of the banks and the credit providers here in Wisconsin. So we just passed a small business bill that actually is providing credit with some help from the government to these banks, and it is making an enormous difference. So my issue here is I favor the small businesses and the Main Street businesses in Wisconsin, and of course some of the big companies. You can ask the people at Harley-Davidson, you can ask the people at the Manitowoc Company, You can ask the ginseng farmers. You can ask the organic farmers in the West. You can ask any kind of business in the state whether I've worked to try to help them, and I have. But, of course, when